What's going on, boys and girls, and welcome back to another episode of Eating Shit. Quick lesson this week. Very, very simple. I actually just wrote a blog post on this. I've been doing a blog post once a week that I just post up on, just a written post on for like my Facebook group and Bigger Pockets and LinkedIn and all that stuff. And like similar to this show, I just think of like, oh, what's like one thing that maybe happened this week, or even not, just like something that either I wish I would have known when I first started, or questions that I get all the time that I'll just put into a written post, that type of thing. So this week, this post was very simple concept, but it was really a lesson that I've gotten over and over and over again, and I just thought about it again this week when I was at a meetup, real estate meetup here in town, not the one that I run, but a different one. And, you know, one of my biggest flaws right now, I think, is just like not talking to enough people, not being like outgoing enough. And I'm sure you guys notice that, you know, there's those people that like talk to everyone, and weird, like they get a lot of things by doing that. I've always been kind of the other way around, and it's actually, you know, one reason that I like running my meetup is because it makes it very easy for me to network. It's much easier to network. I mean, I don't really have to try to network when I'm the one running the meetup, because people come up to me afterwards. But to go to other people's meetups and to network at those meetups, or just talking to people in general, I have to be super, super intentional about it, and it's one thing that I'm trying to work on. So I go to this other meetup, and then I'm trying to talk to some new people after the meetup, and I get talking to this, I don't know if he's a kid, but I'll just call him a kid, and he, you know, he has a deal in contract, and this is kind of what I put in the post, that like usually, and I don't think he's ever done a deal before, I didn't get that impression, but usually whenever someone has like their first deal in contract, or like they have a deal that they need to bring to a meetup to sell, like it's not gonna be a deal, and that's just how it is. Like it's not his fault or whatever. You just don't know what you don't know, and more often than not, when you put your first deal in contract and then like you can't sell it right away, it's because it's not a deal. And especially if you have to go to a meetup to find a buyer, probably not gonna find a buyer there, maybe, but you know, it's just kind of one of those things that there are buyers that go to meetups, but most of the time, like the people that on average that like go to meetups over and over and over again are not like real players, or maybe they are, but they're like super, super slow moving. So it's very hard to sell like a wholesale deal to that type of buyer. So anyway, you know, I get talking to this kid, and he's like got this deal and he's got it in contract, needs to find a buyer. I was like, okay, like what is it? And he's like, oh, it's a piece of land. And I'm like, oh, fuck, like, you know, even worse, like, good luck trying to find a buyer for land here at this meetup. But some of the best deals we've done this year were just raw pieces of land. So I was like, well, tell me about it. And so he tells me a little bit about it, and I asked him some questions, like if it has utilities, like if he looked at the comps and stuff like that. And from what he said, I haven't dug into it yet, but from what he said, it actually sounded pretty good. And I'm like, all right, well, I know how to process that. I was like, you don't, but I do. But from what you just told me, it sounds like something we can make money on. So send me the info or whatever. And that was really it. So he just sent me the info this morning, but it's not really about the deal. I was just thinking about, you know, some of the questions that I asked this kid. You know, he was saying like, oh, I have a good relationship with the seller. I was like, oh, you know the seller like personally? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. One of the questions that I asked him was like, how long do we have? Because usually when you're talking to someone who's a wholesaler or whatever, you know, it's like they overpromise the seller. They're like, we can close in 7 days, because that's how they heard to do it online. And it's like, oh, well, now you have 1 day to find a buyer, and you're never going to be able to close that fast. So usually it's like, yeah, I was expecting him to say like, oh, we got to close tomorrow. I was like, how long do we have? He's like, 3 years. I was like, you signed a contract for 3 years with this guy? He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, cool. But then, you know, I was thinking about him talking to this seller, and I'm like, really, probably the way that he got this deal was just by talking to people. And, you know, maybe he heard about wholesaling and was just thinking like, oh, who's someone that I know that owns property, and just randomly talks to this guy and like, yeah, I'll sell you this piece of land or whatever, and here's what I want for it. And so he puts his first deal in contract that he might make money on just by talking to someone. And then same thing, it's like just because he talked to me and just because I talked to him, like that's the only way that this deal is going to get monetized, the same exact thing. And when I was writing this blog post, I was thinking about actually our first deal that we ever flipped. Same exact thing. It came from this dude that I met at my meetup a couple months earlier, and this was his first deal too, first wholesale deal. And this was like right when Wes and I started working together. And so obviously I had wholesale deals before, he had managed rehabs before, but we had yet to actually like flip a house. So we had just partnered up, and then we get this lead from this guy named Dusty. And Dusty had never done a deal. He just started coming to the meetup a couple months before. And like Dusty didn't do any type of marketing yet. Like nothing. All he did was tell people, oh, I'm buying houses now, and like I'm looking for fixer-uppers and stuff like that. So he goes around telling everyone that he knows, and he's like a social, outgoing guy. And then sure enough, 60 days later, friend of a friend type thing, and he finds this deal of very distressed property, divorce situation. It's like the type of stuff that we buy all the time, and he didn't really know how to do it. So we walked him through it, helped him out in exchange for like getting this deal. But all of these things are examples of just like talking to people and having conversations, and not even really asking for things, just letting people know what you do is so huge and productive. Like you never know who you're talking to or who you're standing next to or what they do, what they can do for you, what you can do for them, anything like that. Like it's such a generic and small thing, but I think it gets overlooked a lot. If you just talk to enough people, like you can get what you want and you will be successful. And I guess the same thing goes for marketing in general, like cold calling. I've talked about that on here before. Like people just severely underestimate the amount of volume that it takes to do deals in any type of marketing, and you're just not talking to enough people. So even if you're paying for it, like mail, same thing, texting, calling, same shit, you're not talking to enough people. But obviously if you're talking face to face with someone, it's much more effective than a cold call. And when you're cold calling, you're specifically asking someone for something, but the same rule applies. You just need to talk to more people. And you'll get super far. People that are good at that and don't take advantage of it, I can't believe it. They just talk to people for no fucking reason. But if you're a little bit intentional about it, super, super powerful. Issues this week. I was thinking about this podcast too. I was like, by thinking about it, I mean, 15 seconds before I started recording, I was like, I don't feel like doing the fucking intro today, and I'm going to change it to lessons, issues, and wins. So there's one lesson, the talk to people thing. Issues, it's called eating shit because like that's the whole point of, not the whole point of entrepreneurship, but like that's what I've done. And I think that that's a necessary step in becoming successful, is eating shit. So, I was like thinking about that, and I'm like, well, fuck, I don't want to talk about like just eating shit all the time. I also want to do, like the lessons type thing, and like that has nothing to do with eating shit. Like, yeah, it's like stuff that I figured out the hard way probably, but I think it would be better if I just do like quick lesson, then we get an issue, because there's always issues to talk about, no matter what, big or small, and then wins. So I think that'll be the new format for this show moving forward. So issue this week, we had this deal in Sun Valley that's just been an absolute clusterfuck, as I suspected from the beginning. But I'll do a full YouTube video on it. I got to go back out there and film about this specific incident that happened out there. You guys that listen to my other podcast know about it, kind of. But I have some footage from what I'm about to talk about here. But it definitely deserves like its own 20-minute video just to go through the whole deal front to back and like kind of show the realities of what we deal with in direct seller, wholesaling, and flipping. So that was an issue. I guess that was, last week into this week is, I'm trying to think about how to frame this. Like, basically, I don't want to tell the whole story right now because I'll just save it for the video, but you kind of need like little pre-frame of just like what this situation is. And it's just like a Sun Valley double wide, super distressed, all fucked up. The seller's like not there because she has a power of attorney, and the power of attorney is handling the sale for her. And first time I went over there, there's a guy like sleeping on the couch in the middle of the day. She's like, oh, don't mind him. Just that. That's like that's what it was. That's like the stereotypical Sun Valley house, I guess. And so then this incident happens with this crazy fucking Michael Vick dog fight, and I'll go into detail in the video about it. I went into detail on my other podcast, but brutal dog fight. Just like one of the most insane things that I've ever had to be a part of in a deal at all. And then if that wasn't enough, the next day after the dog fight, we're getting blown up from the seller because they need us to release $1,500 so they can get the real seller into a new place until this place closes. And so we did that. And you can easily get screwed by doing that. We don't want to be giving people money when it's not closed yet. So what we did, and we have a policy for this, and it's like basically we have to be through our due diligence, meaning that we know like it's a done deal. Title commitment has to be in, meaning that they have a property that they can legally sell us, and they have to have already signed the deed. So literally everything is ready to go as soon as we say so. And luckily with this, we weren't all the way through our due diligence, but we pretty much were. And since this was a wholesale deal, had a ton of interest. I had like many solid offers from solid buyers. So even if 1, 2, and 3 didn't work out, I knew we would still be able to process it. So that's just as good. And then because of the power of attorney situation, they actually already did sign the deed. So we're like, all right, we can release it. So we released this money. Seller's super thankful. That's how a lot of them are until they're not. And then 4th of July weekend happens, and we don't really know what's going on. Besides, we're getting contacted from her because the funds aren't in her account. She lets us know at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, the weekend of a holiday. And then 4th of July was on Saturday. Dates are all screwed up, and it's not our fault. Like, it was her bank that was holding the funds, but because of that, they didn't have a place for the actual seller to go. And so I guess the seller went back into her house, the house that we have in contract. So then later on in the week, she's still there. Why? I don't know. And then we get a text that basically says like, oh, she went a little crazy and broke out all the windows in the house from the inside. And like, you guys should come secure the property. And and then she put, quote, helpers don't try to come back in, meaning like tweakers and squatters and stuff like that. So it's just like, fucking A. And, that's the issue with these deals. Issues are issues, whatever. But with a wholesale deal specifically, like, we have already assigned this deal at this point. So the buyer is taking over the terms of our original agreement with the seller. So now anything that happens with the deal, like, we have to definitely get approved through the buyer, like our partner on this deal. And this guy specifically, like, I've done a ton of deals with him, and I know what would be okay and what wouldn't, but I would still want to run it by him. And so I was like, all right, like, I'll deal with it. So the next morning, that was like a Thursday night late when we got that text. The next morning I call him, I tell him the situation, and then it's just like, well, how many windows are broken out? I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, I haven't been there. Well, he's like, I can send my guys over there, but I don't want them to be like fighting tweakers and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I get it. And I was like, you know what? I'll run over there real quick, and then I can like count the windows and, get a good idea of what's actually going on over there. And if anyone's there, I will try to get them out, and at least we'll know. So that's when I filmed, the part 1 for this video, and then we'll have to backtrack into the part 2, 3, 4, 5 for the whole YouTube story that is way more detailed than I'm giving you right here. And anyway, so I go over there, and I do this, like, I have to clear the house, and just a sketchy situation, and you're just dealing with that. And then of course he's going to want money off because now, like, all the windows need to be replaced. So now we have to eat that, but then we ask for that from the seller because that's reasonable ask. So all was good there. But it's just like an example of, you think that it's like, all right, this deal was already like a clusterfuck and like this crazy shit with the dogs happened, and now this, and it's just like one thing after another all the time. So that was kind of a big issue that we were dealing with, I guess, late last week into early this week, just trying to get that thing secured and to the finish line. But that also turned into the win of the week. We closed that one. And when did we close that? It was sometime this week. It was like Wednesday or middle of the week or something. We ended up closing it, which was good because it was a big deal for us. So you have to keep that in mind. Like, most of the time when we're doing like all this crazy shit on these deals, and it's just like one thing after another, and it's just, you never know until you get the email from title that's like, we're on record, and it actually closed. You're just, the whole time you're just like, dude, this is never going to work. Like, something else is going to come up, or it's just so many fucking problems over and over and over. Usually when we have deals like that, it's like the 80-20 rule, where it's like, those are the deals that we make the least amount of money on. They're just like a crazy amount of work, and then you get, if they end up closing, so a lot of times they fall apart after you do all this work, and then it's like, oh, we got zero for all of that. And then other times, like this one in Cold Springs I may have talked about on here earlier this year, we did so much work, and like everyone in the office is working on this deal, and we ended up doing it, and like it's all good because the guy like truly needed all the help and all that. And then at the end of the day, we made $7,500, which, if it was just me, if you're self-employed, like that's a good amount of money. But when it's like, that's $7,500 for the company. So I just want to say that because, someone out there listening is probably like, oh, you're a dick thinking that, that's not a lot of money. It's not what I'm saying. But, when you have an office and payroll and marketing and overhead and all this other shit, it's like you would have to do so many deals of that size just to stay in business. Like, it just wouldn't work. Usually that's how these deals go. Luckily with this one, it was a big one. I think it was like $45K was a net profit on that, somewhere around there. So that makes it worth it for sure when you can close some deals that actually like move the needle for the business, and like our sales guys get paid good on them and stuff like that. So that makes it all good. That was probably the biggest win. I think we closed another one this week too, but now I can't remember. But either way, yeah. I guess stay tuned. If you're listening on the podcast app, sub to the YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, keep an eye out for that video. I don't know when it'll happen. I'll have to go over there like this week probably. I'm trying to think. And that's the thing too. It's like, even after we closed, this is the thing I forgot to say about these type of deals is that they always linger too. Like, you can never, even after you close it, it's always like something else. That's exactly how that Cold Springs one was, because we did all this stuff and it like wasn't going to work, and then like they're hard to sell, and it's like you almost make it and then it closes. But then even after that, you have to keep following up with the deal, because in that one it was like the car had to be towed out of there and it didn't get done on the day it was supposed to get done. So then I got to keep following up with the tow company and following up with the buyer, making sure it's all done, all this crap. And then with this one, that was the afternoon before we closed. I get a call from the buyer, and he's like, hey, like one of the sheets of plywood is gone off the window that they put up. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And he's like, and they used the screws off the plywood to secure the shed in the backyard. And because they used like these special screws, his guys that were like very recognizable, he knew that they were those screws. And I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, all right, well, let me call her. So I call her, and thinking that, I'm like, dude, that was like tweakers or, something weird. And she's like, oh, no, I did that. I'm like, okay, well, like, what's going on? I was like, do you still have stuff in the shed then? Oh, yeah, I still have stuff in there. I'm like, all right, like, when are you going to have that out? Oh, well, I got stuff to do the next few, so probably Saturday, which is today when I'm recording this. I'm like, okay, it's like, just like you no matter how good of a job we do on some of these deals, like following our process and making it very clear on what needs to happen, like with the sellers and the next steps and this and double, triple, quadruple confirming, some people just still will just do whatever the fuck they want to do. Like, I've kind of come to accept that. And she's definitely one of those people. You guys will know more about that with the dog situation, because she and the dogs weren't supposed to be there, and they were, and then this crazy shit happened. And then now it's like she's known this whole time, and she's the one that told us weeks ago, oh yeah, I'll be out of here in 2 days or whatever. And now it's like we're about to close the next morning, and she knows that like her stuff is not out of there. So and had no intention of telling us. I guess she just like locked the shed and that was going to be good enough. And it's like, no, like if the buyer wouldn't have told me that, like they would have already thrown all of her shit away right now. So luckily I reached out to her and I'm like, okay, so like the weekend, like that's when you're going to have it done. And she's like, yeah. So then I have to tell the buyer, hey, sorry, but like don't trash out at least the sheds until after the weekend when we get confirmation. So we've already closed the deal. We went through all this stuff to get there. We pulled it off. We made good money, and now it's still going to linger. And of course, it's 5 p.m. on a Saturday night right now when she said it was going to be done. And I know that Steve, our TC, would have texted me if she was done, and he has not. So inevitably, she has not confirmed with him that she's done, because she's not done. Tomorrow, I can guarantee you we still will not have a text from her. Monday morning will roll around, and now the buyer will be blowing me up. He already contacted me today about it, but he will contact me Monday morning when we haven't heard from her still about this. That's just how this stuff goes. And then when we reach her about 2 p.m. on Monday, she'll say, oh, I need 5 more days. So that's how these things go. Sometimes, that's what they don't teach you in the wholesaling course, is the reality of these deals. And that's why I wanted to do like the full deep dive video for this one coming up, because it's a great example. It's like a lot of shit in one deal, but it is shit that we deal with all the time. That's why my tone is like, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to fucking happen, and then this is going to happen. You know why I know that? It's because it's happened on fucking 50 deals before this one. So I just know that that's how this is going to go. But it is what it is. Definitely grateful that that we got it to close and everything worked out. It's a great deal. Good learning experience. Way to tighten up the process on this one, and also kind of open my eyes that like no matter how good our process gets, we still cannot control 100% what other people do. We can just like do our best, and that's about it. So thanks for listening. Make sure to leave a rating on the podcast app, share the show if you know someone that might benefit from it, and subscribe on FEEKI Flips YouTube channel if you're not on there already, and we will see you on the next episode.